Welcome to Temple of the Human Heart, where love is the doctrine, compaction is the practice, awakening is the work. Here we seek first the kingdom within. As you return to yourself, what was fragmented begins to gather again.
Welcome to the Temple of the Human Heart podcast, where love is the doctrine, compassion is the practice, and awakening is the work. I am Yisra'el Apriale, your host at the Temple tonight. Here we seek first the kingdom within, and as you return to yourself, the fragments begin to gather again. So today I want to ask you a question that completely transformed my understanding of prayer. What if prayer was never meant to be about convincing God to act? What if it was always meant to awaken us to what Spirit is already doing? So in today's lesson, prayer as participation, joining what Spirit is already doing, we'll explore what prayer was intended to be, examine how Jesus approached prayer throughout the Gospels, and discover how moving from petition to participation can transform the way we live, speak, and walk with the divine. Let's begin. Okay, so what if prayer was never meant to convince God? What if it was meant to awaken us? Because for years, I believe prayer was about asking heaven to move. Today, I believe prayer is learning how to move with heaven. And I want you to take a breath with me for a moment. Because if prayer is participation, then this conversation is not just about theology. It's about the way we live, the way we listen, the way we respond when life places a holy invitation in front of us. So let's talk about my story. Because there was a time when I believed that if I prayed long enough, gave faithfully enough, served consistently enough, fasted sincerely enough, and trusted deeply enough, eventually God would intervene. I wasn't pretending. That's what I truly believed. Because I believed the scripture said, when it spoke about asking, I believe that if I honored God, God would honor me. So while I'm waiting, I served, I sacrificed, I prayed, and then life happened. I lost jobs, financial struggles continued, dreams remained delayed. I watched other people testify about breakthrough after breakthrough while I quietly wondered why heaven seemed silent for me. And if I'm honest, that silence did something to me because it made me examine not only my circumstances, but my assumptions. And eventually I stopped asking. I stopped asking, why isn't God answering me? Instead, another question emerged. What if I've misunderstood prayer itself? What if I had inherited a model of prayer that was incomplete? And also, what if I had reduced prayer to a spiritual emergency line when it was meant to be a way of living awake and aware? That question changed everything for me. It didn't make life easier, but it made life readable. It gave language to what had felt like confusion. And it invited me to reconsider not just what I was asking for, but how I was showing up in the asking. So, I love the historical lenses or the lenses period. So we're going to go through a couple of lenses in this lesson today. So again, starting with the historical lens. Many of us inherited a model of prayer centered on supplication. Well, let's break down this word supplication. It comes from the Latin supplicare, meaning to plead humbly, to beg, or to entreat. And in the scripture, Supplication often refers to earnest requests made during distress. Paul writes in Philippians 4:6, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known unto God." So supplication does have its place. There are moments of grief, dependence, and honest need when crying out is just deeply human. But over time, many of us unknowingly built our entire spiritual life around pleading. Prayer became a negotiation. If I ask enough, do I believe enough? Have I sacrificed enough? Maybe God will then act. Maybe the door will open. Maybe the answer will come. Maybe suffering will let up. Or maybe the waiting will end. And because that pattern feels familiar, we can begin to mistake urgency for intimacy. We can begin to think that the loudest prayers are the truest prayers. But the temple asks a different question. Was supplication meant to be the destination, or was it one stage in humanity's spiritual development? Could it be that prayer was always meant to mature us beyond begging into cooperation? That possibility changes the whole frame, because then prayer is no longer just about getting God to do something for us. It becomes a process of being formed by the presence we are addressing. So let's look at this symbolically. When I began studying the ancient text along scripture, I noticed something. Jesus most certainly prayed, but when he encountered life, he often didn't plead. He just spoke. Lazarus, come forth. Peace, be still. Stretch out your hand. Be opened. Rise. These were not desperate requests sent toward heaven. They were declarations flowing from union with the divine. There was no magic or manifestation. There was participation. Jesus repeatedly says, "I only do what I see the Father doing." That sentence may be one of the clearest descriptions of awakened prayer in the entire gospel, because he wasn't trying to convince God. He wasn't cooperating with what Spirit was already revealing. And that matters because it means prayer is not simply about emotional intensity. It's about relational awareness. Jesus moved as if heaven and earth were not separated by distance, but connected through communion. He lived from alignment. And when you live from alignment, your words begin to sound different. Your tone changes. Your inner posture changes. And most of all, your expectation changes. You begin speaking as though you are not abandoned. You begin speaking as though you are accompanied. All right, so let's look at our awakening lens. This realization transformed my understanding, because prayer stopped becoming a request for intervention and prayer became an alignment. Not, please fix this, but where is truth here? What is love inviting? What is life already bringing forth? And prayer became less about changing God's mind and more about renewing my own. But that doesn't eliminate asking. It changes the posture beneath the asking. And what I learned through all of these years of study and understanding is, at one point, I just stopped believing that God would answer my prayers because I would see breakthroughs with everybody else. But when you are on the path of awakening, their breakthroughs, I would say should not matter, but do not matter, because we on this journey, we aren't going to do things the same way. So all the supplication and the begging, and if it's God's will, and the humility, the false humility that we've been taught to have, doesn't work on this side. On this side, declaration is what works. On this side, speak it and it's done is what works. So we have to be mindful that when we walk through this awakening journey, that the things that used to work just don't work anymore. And we have to remember that the divine is within us. The kingdom is within us. So if we don't have what we prayed for, remember, our identity has to change in order for us to have the capacity to hold what we ask for. Because you got to remember, there's a difference between a request made from fear and a request made from trust. And that difference, just as an example, is it says, I'm alone. And asking, that says, I am listening. So pleading says, I am alone. And asking says, I am listening. When prayer becomes awakening, we begin to notice that some of what we have been waiting for is not absent. It's simply subtle. It may already be present as an invitation, a correction, a nudge, a conversation, or a choice. Awakening trains us to recognize divine movement in forms smaller than the dramatic answer we expected. And that is where prayer becomes deeply practical. It's no longer spiritual. It's more embodied, more honest, and more responsive. So let's look at our transformation lens. Paul writes in Romans 12:2, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, what he did not say is wait until your circumstances change, because transformation begins within. This is where declaration begins to make sense. Declaration is not forcing reality. It is speaking from an identity that has already been transformed by truth. So when Jesus said, peace, be still, he wasn't performing a verbal technique. He was expressing the peace he had already embodied. And authority flowed from that identity. It wasn't about volume. It wasn't about repetition. It wasn't about the perfect wording. That got me today. I was trying to pray to the monad, pray to the divine today. And I got tripped up over perfect wording. And if the kingdom is inside me, I don't have to worry about perfect wording. That was a lesson I had, a mini lesson today. But if our consciousness remains rooted in fear, then declarations can simply become another form of anxious control. Because we are still trying to force heaven to respond. But when our consciousness awakens, our words become an extension of what we have already come to know within ourselves. And that means prayer is not only something we say, it's something we become. And when we become different, our speech changes naturally. Our decisions change naturally. Our pace changes naturally. Our way of even entering a room changes naturally. Because transformation is not cosmetic. It is consciousness becoming visible. Now let's go back to participation. What can we do to participate? Or how can we ask the Spirit in a different way other than why is this happening to me? Or why do I feel like I've missed out on something? So under our participation lens, we're going to look at this shift that kind of changed everything for me. Because for years, I believe my responsibility ended with prayer. I would ask, I would believe, and then I would wait. And if nothing happened, I assumed God had either said no, not yet, or that I somehow lacked enough faith. But awakening revealed something different. Prayer is not the end of the journey. Prayer is the beginning of participation. When Jesus raised Lazarus, he first spoke the words, "Lazarus, come forth." But immediately afterward, he turned to the people standing around him and said, "Loose him and let him go." So that miracle did not end with resurrection. The community had to participate in that restoration. Okay, going back to the Bible verse, John 11:43 through 44. I needed to go back to make sure that we have clarity in the Bible verse that I chose for this lesson. So let's read starting from 43. And when he thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come forth." And he that was dead came forth, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus saith unto them, "Loose him and let him go." So let's look deeper at what is going on here, because again, this is the King James Version, so we're not dealing with modern language. We are dealing with several centuries ago. So let's talk about what this actually means. So let's talk about what happens in the story. So Jesus performs the miracle by calling Lazarus out of the tomb. Lazarus walks out alive, but he is still wrapped in grave clothes. He has been given new life, yet he is still bound by what belonged to his old condition. Then Jesus turned to the people standing nearby and says, "Loose him and let him go." Let me go back because I just noticed something. Lazarus walks out alive, but he is still wrapped in grave clothes. He has been given new life, yet he is still bound by what belonged to his old condition. I want you to hold on to that because we're going to dig a little deeper into what that means for us. So then Jesus turns to the people standing nearby and says, "Loose him and let him go." Now, Jesus could have caused the grave clothes to disappear with a word, but instead, he invited the community to participate in the restoration. And the resurrection was the miracle. Unbinding was the participation. So the pattern still speaks to us today. Spirit may awaken us to a new life, but we are invited to participate in removing the grave clothes that keep us from living freely. So those things, those personas or those false selves of fear, shame, false identities, unforgiveness, and the beliefs that no longer belong to who we are becoming. And that's what I wanted to, because when we look at Lazarus was given new life, yet he was still bound by what belonged to his old condition. So, what if you're giving that new car, but you are bound to cars never clean. The gas is always on E. It's never, the maintenance. You're participating with the new car as you were with the old car. So those conditions have to be removed. All right, so what I want us to hold on to is awakening calls us out of the tomb. Participation removes the grave clothes. Return is learning to live as the person who has been set free. But let's dig a little deeper, because what I'm teaching, if I don't feel that place of satisfaction or satiated, that means I need to dig a little further. So let's look at the sequence of that Bible verse. Jesus calls Lazarus, come forth. Lazarus comes out of the tomb alive, but he's still bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face is wrapped with a cloth. And then Jesus says to those standing around, loose him and let him go. Unwrap him so that he may be free. So the loosing part is literally the act of unwrapping the burial cloths so Lazarus can walk freely and return to normal life. Historically, Lazarus had been buried according to Jewish burial customs. His body was wrapped in linen strips with a separate cloth around his face. When Jesus raised him, Lazarus came out still wearing those burial wrappings. Jesus instructed the people nearby to remove them. But symbolically, the grave clothes can represent anything that belonged to the old life, but no longer belongs to the awakened life. And again, those false personas that we carry, fear, shame, false identity, religious guilt, limiting beliefs, trauma, wounded patterns. Those are some of the things, especially when I left Christianity. I had a hard time at first because I, had been indoctrinated into learning religion a certain way. So when I was free and I didn't have those bounds and those rules and those laws to follow, I became lost. I didn't know what to do because in religion, everything is set up and, set out for you. Do this, then this will happen. Do this, then that would happen. If you don't do this, then that's going to happen. Everything was set out plainly. But when I left religion, I had to go back and figure this out. And I didn't have anybody I could listen to that had walked through this that I knew of before me. So I kind of walked this thing alone for a long time. But I didn't realize that although I was given new life, I still had old conditions that I was carrying with me. So it took a while for me to let go of the fear of leaving religion, let go of the shame of not having Kojic and being represented by any religion or any club or anything. It took a long time for me to get rid of the false identity, the false humility, the inauthentic self. And I also had religious guilt because I had been learning, going, walking, fitting in the same direction as everybody else. And then I turned. Oh, I apologize for the pause, but I had a dream about this about almost 30 years ago, and it's finally making sense. I was on this boat, this huge ship. Everything was made out of wood, so it was a really long time ago. But on this ship, the water was so beautiful, crystal blue. But I was on this ship in battle mode, and I was battling. I couldn't tell you who I was fighting. I just remember this battle, and I was so exhausted battling something I couldn't see. And I heard Jesus say, "Come here." And I looked, and next thing you know, I'm on the beach walking with Jesus. And we are walking in the opposite direction of everybody else. And as I'm walking, the faces of these people, I don't know who they are, but I recognize these faces, and they are growling and sneering as I'm walking through them on this beach in the opposite direction. I'm still walking with Jesus, and all of a sudden we end up in this cave. And in this cave, there's this elderly man. Oh, he looked about 120, 140 years old. This elderly man had this long beard, and he turned to me and he opened up this book, and I specifically remember the word akin, A-K-I-N, in this book, and it was highlighted. And when I went to research it and find out the definition of this word, it said family. Now this is making sense. This is making sense. So me leaving religion and actually doing something different, I dreamt about that. Wow. Okay, I'm going to get back to the lesson. All right, so point of all of this Bible verse is Jesus gave Lazarus life, and the community helped remove what kept him from living it. And this is an important distinction because it keeps the symbolism grounded in the text rather than replacing the historical event. So the community was invited to participate in his restoration. You may not have the community, but you are invited to participate in your restoration. So prayer awakens us to what Spirit is doing. Participation is our response to that awakening. Transformation unfolds as we cooperate with that work. And the return is the fruit of living from that new life. I want to say that one more time because I want to say it for the people in the back. Prayer awakens us to what Spirit is doing. So we're not sitting around saying, "Help me, God, please, please help me, God." We are declaring. But first, we need to ask, Spirit, what are you doing? That's a whole different type of praying. So prayer awakens us to what Spirit is doing. Participation is our response to that awakening. Transformation unfolds as we cooperate with that work. And return is the fruit of living from that new life. Okay? All right, so let's get to our ending here. Okay, so let's go back. I'm looking at my notes here. All right, so going back, we've broken down Jesus declaring Lazarus come forth. Let's talk about when Jesus fed the multitude. He did not simply rain bread down from heaven. He blessed what was already present. 5 loaves and 2 fish. I always get that number wrong. I'm not sure why. And then placed them into the hands of his disciples. The disciples distributed what heaven had blessed. divine provision required human participation. All right. Even the man with the withered hand was first told, "Stretch forth your hand." The blind man was instructed to wash in the pool of Siloam. The servants filled the water jars before they became wine. And again, Scripture reveals the same pattern. Spirit initiates, humanity participates. Maybe that's why James writes, faith without works is dead. Not because works earn God's favor, but because genuine faith naturally exposes itself through participation. Genuine faith naturally expresses itself through participation. For much of my life, I waited for heaven to move while remaining still. On some levels, I would say that's true. Because I would pray, and if it was God's will, then I'll wait until that happened. I didn't participate in prayer because I never asked Spirit, "What are you doing? Where do you want me to join you in what you're already doing?" Today, my prayer sounds different. So I'm asking, Spirit, where are you already moving? Like, the path is written. We're just following along. And it's not anything new that we're asking for that Spirit doesn't know about. So my question now is, Spirit, where are you already moving? What opportunity have you already placed before me? Because some things we wait on that grand opportunity, something that's going to knock us over. Sometimes it could just be something subtle. So what opportunity have you already placed before me? What conversation have I been avoiding? What gift have I buried because I believed I wasn't ready? Or what action would love take today? Participation transforms prayer from passive waiting into active cooperation. It shifts the focus from asking God to do everything for us to asking how might we become co-laborers with the divine. So how do we help what's already in place? What moves can I make to help what's already in place? But perhaps the greatest miracle is not simply that heaven acts. It is that heaven invites us to participate. And that invitation is not a burden, it's dignity, it's trust. It's the recognition that we were never meant to be passive spectators in our own becoming. So let's shift a little bit to our return lens. So when I stopped asking, why isn't God moving? And started asking, how do I participate with what Spirit is already doing? That question changed my mornings. So instead of waking up waiting for rescue, I now wake up looking for participation. Where is healing already emerging? Where is wisdom already speaking? What opportunity have I overlooked because it didn't arrive wrapped in a miracle? Because participation doesn't reject miracles. It recognizes that many miracles invite us into cooperation. Jesus called Lazarus from the tomb, but then he told the people, unbind him. Resurrection happened, and then participation completed the miracle. The loaves were multiplied, but the disciples still had to distribute the bread. So divine action and human participation are not enemies, they're partners. And, when I learned this, I said to myself, because my prayers weren't being answered. And, my friends would come to me and let's do this thing and let's do this and, pray this and pray that. And I'm just looking at them. I'm like, my prayers aren't answered. So I don't want to get into this prayer circle and knowing that my prayers aren't being answered. But I did notice I stopped to ask, why are my prayers not being answered? I stopped for a while and I was speaking to spirit, randomly. And I will come in to gather wisdom for lessons. But I felt empty. And I felt so far away from spirit. And I said to myself, when I was in religion, I felt spirit strong. And I cannot answer why that is between now and back then, but I learned that I had really stopped believing that my prayers would be answered. I believe for everybody else, but when it came to me, I was like, well, God's not answering my prayers, so I'm just gonna keep living until I die. Needing things, wanting things to change, but it's not working for me. But renewing my mind and learning that I need to participate, because I was praying and still putting spirit on the back burner. Like, if you open this door, then I'll grab the what is that saying? I'll grab the reins and, ride the horse myself. Or I can do this myself if you just open that door. And I wasn't paying attention that a part of awakening is understanding that spirit is moving first. And it's my job to join in. It's my job to join in to what spirit is already doing. And when I began living this way, prayer became less like a ritual I performed and more like a rhythm I entered. I had a rhythm of listening, a rhythm of noticing, a rhythm of responding, and a rhythm of returning. So let's take a look at some reflection questions. And I want you to take the time to stop, ask yourself, but I want you to be in a place as quiet as you can find. And take those moments of quietness and stillness and just ask yourself, have I been trying to persuade God? Ask Spirit, where are you already moving in my life? What capacity is being formed within me? What miracle might already be unfolding in a form I failed to recognize because it didn't match my expectations? What invitation is waiting for my participation today? So instead of asking, when will God answer my prayer? Ask, where is Spirit already moving that I have failed to notice? I want that to hit. Where is Spirit already moving that I have failed to notice? What opportunity have I overlooked because it didn't look like my expectation? Where have I been waiting when I should have been participating? And if love were leading my next decision, what would I do? I want you to take a moment with these questions. Don't rush past them. Let them read you. Let them reveal where your soul has been waiting at the edge of action. And this is the affirmation for today's lesson. Take your time. Today, I release the belief that I must convince heaven to act. I awaken to the divine presence already within me. I align my heart with truth. I speak from wholeness instead of fear. I become a willing participant in what Spirit is already bringing forth. As I awaken, I return. As I return, life flows through me. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Temple of the Human Heart podcast. If today's teaching resonated with you, share it with someone who has been waiting for God to move, when perhaps Spirit has already been inviting them to participate. You may contact us at info@awakenandreturn.com. You may leave prayer requests, or if you have any questions about the lessons, email us at that email address. You may also visit us at www.awakenandreturn to listen to past lessons, purchase our albums and merchandise, or join the Temple Circle for deeper lessons on returning. Remember, love is the doctrine, compassion is the practice, and awakening is the work. Seek first the kingdom within, and as you return to yourself, the fragments begin to gather again. Until next time, awaken, remember, and return.